which is what we had been talking about last time. There were two questions that were asked. One of them was about a woman traveling and traveling or visiting the lands of non-Muslims. So as far as the first question is concerned, you have a number of hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he says to the woman, whoever believes in Allah on the last day should not travel without a mahram. Then you have another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said you should not travel without a mahram for a period of 1 day. Then you have another hadith where you said you should not travel for a period of 2 days. And you have another hadith that said you should not travel for a period of 3 days. These three hadith are indicative of the impermissibility of a woman to travel without a mahram. But there's a number of questions that come into this. Even amongst the Shafi'is, they allow a woman to make hajj if she is amongst other women. So there has to be more to this. It's not as simple as just looking at these hadith and saying, okay, it is not permissible. Why did the Prophet ﷺ give different timelines? This is a question. It deserves exploration, right? Why would he select? So the first one, where he said that a woman should not travel without a mahram, a person can say, okay, this hadith is general, and now when you have these specific timelines, it's specific. Why these timelines? Why allow 1 day? Why allow 2 days? Why allow 3 days? If we assume that there are different women coming to him and asking him the same question. Because it's not possible the same woman is coming and asking, and he's giving 3 different answers.
Depends on the context.
Okay, what is some context that we can come up with that would help us understand this? All right, the purpose of travel. Okay. What else? All right, the distance. All right, so what is happening? So is the distance the reasoning? Does that? It could be.
Then it could be.
It could be. All right. So, but here in 3 days, how far can I get? In today's world, right? I can cross the world and come back again, right? So it's not the distance. I can definitely see that, or the time zones. I can see that. But I guess the question is, you guys are saying, all right, distant. Why?
You said distance. Because of the situation at that time.
All right. So let's take the situation into account. What situation? What can happen?
It wasn't safe to have like a
all right. It wasn't safe. Yeah. So now you guys are proposing that the illah or the reasoning for him ﷺ putting different timelines is that this is how much safety there was within that space. Meaning that now he ﷺ was comfortable enough for somebody to travel a day and they would still be under the political protection of the Muslims. They could travel 2 days, they'd still be under the political protection. 3 days, they'd still be under the political protection. And it also helps us make sense on why Imam Shāfi himself said that a woman can go and make hajj with ma'unat al-nisa, like with a group of women. Why? Because she will be safe, right? So if we go, it goes back to the issue of safety. Not just that, you have another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that a woman will leave La'ina, so she will leave Yemen making hajj, and the only thing that she will fear is Allah. In this hadith, some scholars will be like, okay, you can't take akhbar, or you can't take signs of the Day of Judgment or the end of times as a means to take a ruling from them. For example, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that al-Ufāt al-Urāt yatatawalūn fil bunyan, right? He said that the Bedouins, with the naked, destitute Bedouins, are going to compete in building tall buildings. Can I take a ruling from this that is impermissible for Bedouins to build tall buildings? No, I can't. It's just a khabar, right? It's just a piece of information that the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that what is going to happen. What about this one that I have? This mar'at al-dha'ina, this woman who is going and traveling, and she's saying all she is fearing is Allah. Can I take a ruling from this, or is there an understanding I can take from this?
I mean, you can understand that it would be safe for her.
Okay, you can understand there's safety. That the Prophet ﷺ here is showing that it's going to be so safe that even a woman will be able to travel alone. Do you think that this is being said in a positive context or a negative context?
Positive.
It's a positive context. And he ﷺ is telling us, like, in a good way, that hey, this is going to happen. It's going to be such safe. Why would he not say that, but what she's doing is haram? She's going to make hajj, right? She's going to make hajj. She's going to go and fulfill a pillar. But he ﷺ is not telling us, he didn't say like, no, but this is wrong, or she didn't do it. He didn't say this about a man. He said it about a woman. He didn't say that a man will leave Yemen. It's not like there was, the political turmoil and instability was all over. It wasn't just like in Mecca and Medina, it was all over. But he's saying that no, a woman will leave. Why? Because women, in general, compared to men, are more, they're more vulnerable, right? This is just a fact, that they're more vulnerable. And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is giving us that example, is telling us that, okay, this is going to be the situation, this is how safe it's going to be. And this is why you have a number of scholars, whenever they talk about traveling with a mahram, they always associate it with the issue of safety. Meaning that if the place that she is going unsafe, it is impermissible for her to travel without a mahram. How can we understand this in a modern context? Now, if women, what happens when a young woman goes to New York or goes to LA? Why do they go in general? Huh? Not to study. They go to get involved in the entertainment industry, right? So what happens to a good number of them? This is not a small percentage. It's not a small number. What happens to them? I'm sorry? Not catcalling. Catcalling is small. You get that everywhere, huh?
Drugs.
Huh?
Oh, drugs. Drugs.
Drugs? Oh, drugs. Right. Drugs is one of a problem, but drugs is the smaller problem in what they lead into. Right. Not sexual harassment, even worse. Like you guys, mashallah, like very underexposed. There two things happen. They'll enter to segue them in convincing them into getting into entertainment. There's only two industries that they end up in. They end up in prostitution or in pornography, right? Why? How come this doesn't happen to men? Again, it's because of the vulnerability. And this is why if you have a young girl, 18 years old, 20 years old, sending her off alone into these places where they are full of predators, why is it important to have a mahram? Right? To be her guardian, to be her advocate, to protect her. The same thing with marriage. And why does a woman need an advocate on her behalf? Why does she need a wali? Because men are going to try and very naturally take advantage. So what do you need? You need a man to deal with a man, right? Because they speak each other's language. Just like when women deal with each other, like a man is not going to step in because there are certain nuances, there are certain ways there are certain things women will notice about each other that men won't notice. And there are things that men will know about each other. They'll be like, no, this is nonsense. He doesn't have any of those things. He's just speaking out of his rear end. I know he's lying. These are the type of things, and these are the reasonings why you have men in certain positions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made them physically stronger. It's as simple as that. He's made them with with this need to defend, right? Like there is an inherent need in men to want to defend women. Like it's there. You will find this, that regardless of the situation, even in public, if a woman is being attacked, what do people automatically assume? That it's the man who's wrong, right? You never have like someone jumping in and be like, yeah, get her, right? You know, it doesn't happen because women in general are the more vulnerable gender. So automatically it's assumed that she is being taken advantage of and she is being abused, which is why people are quicker to come to her aid. So does that help give a little bit of context on why they need to travel with the mahram and why women have wali? So again, it's to the place. It's very important to understand where they're going. It's very important to understand, the purpose of what it is that they're going. And this leads to, there are a lot of ramifications to this. If my daughter wants to go, like we're in Virginia, if my daughter wants to go and study in California, is it permissible for me to let her go and study? Oh, it depends. Okay, it depends on what?
Like was she going with you? What's happening?
She's going alone. It's a college. It's a university.
I mean, we're waiting for your answer.
What do you guys, based on what I presented, what do you guys think?
No, it's not.
It's not, okay. Because
There are too many risks.
most college girls are taken advantage of sexually.
Yeah.
I'd have to see statistics for that. I don't think that's the case.
I mean,
Are some, yes, but that's not going to prevent them from being taken advantage of in other places as well. And are girls who live at home with their parents taken advantage of sexually in like not in the home environment, but who live at home?
I mean, if they're living with the parents, maybe the chances are lower. But
Maybe, right? There's a chance for that, for sure. But again, I don't know. I don't have the numbers. So for someone to come and tell me like, just on a purely theoretical discussion, I would say no. But if somebody came to me and be like, no, Sheikh, look, 70% of the girls who go and study at colleges, they're sexually molested in their first year. Right? Then you'd have an argument. Then I would be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Or allowing for example, I'm sure it's happened in many homes. A girl, she graduates college, right? She's 22 and she gets a job in another state, or 3 states over, or 4 states over, or internationally. One of the brothers I know, she got a job and now she's overseas, unmarried.
maybe it comes back to like whether, like let's say, whether her father wants to allow it or maybe her husband or not. Is that a factor?
No, I mean the thing is, if something's impermissible, if I allow my daughter to drink alcohol, is that okay?
No.
No, right? It has to be halal or haram, right? And that's the first step. And then we can talk about, like, if something's halal and my father is preventing me from it, it depends on the situation, right? Because he has the right, as being my father, of preventing me from doing certain things. The first question is, like, okay, is this that space or not? Is it essentially haram, where the father doesn't even need to have a discussion, because he'd be like, well, it's haram, just like eating pork and just like drinking alcohol? Or is it something that's halal, that's like, okay, hey, listen, we need to explore this a little bit? Yes?
What about in terms of like the woman, she lives with her wedding,
Yeah.
but she moves out?
Uh-huh. Oh, and that happens too. Like, so you have women who, because of the environment at home, in that, not that the parents are physically abusive or sexually abusive, but they're toxic, right? You know, like, there's a lot of emotional drain when you come home. You're constantly under stress, and you're like, I can't live here anymore. I love my parents, I just can't live with them. Can she move out? Or it's not even a toxic environment. She just wants to establish herself, and she just wants to get out of the house. So again, these are all theoretical discussions. I would say that there is halal.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah, it's halal. Okay, here, why would it be impermissible?
What if the father says, no, don't leave?
No. Then that's a different discussion, right? That's a different discussion. When can I disagree with my father? Right? That's a separate discussion. And I'm okay with having that one. But at least initially, is it okay for her to make the decision to leave? I think so. I think so. And there are another layer of issues that are associated with this too. It's like, okay, why has it come to a point where our sons and daughters are reaching that age where they can now be independent instead of choosing to get married? Right? That's another layer of questions that needs to be explored as well. Is it an obligation of everyone to get married? No, obviously it's not. But why is it that we have a higher percentage not choosing to do that versus a minority who's choosing to do that? It's not, all discussions are nuanced, right? It's not, it's not something that is so easy, just a blunt, no, that's haram, khalas, doors closed, everybody needs to stay home. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work like that. I mean, even historically, culturally, what happens for most women, and the things I think that's still the case today, is women generally move from their father's house to their husbands, right? Like, this is what happens, right, culturally, and it's a tradition that still continues. There's nothing wrong with that, but now there's a new tradition that's happening. Is like there's a transition phase, right? She will move out independently, or he'll move out independently, and then they'll get married later. Like, people are not getting married as early as they did previously. There are a number of factors to that. I personally think the biggest factor is just too much choice. There's just way too much choice. Like, before, choices were limited. Now it's just like unlimited choices, and it's just like everything is just swipe right. You know what I mean? Like, or swipe left. Like, you can just get rid of people so easily, and we've just become so petty in choosing potential spouses that it's like no, like, nose too big, earrings too big, hair too long. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't like petty things. Like, I don't like flower print shirts. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, like, whatever, man. Like, and then this just kind of delays things. It kind of delays things. A lot of this pettiness, and it's really unfortunate. But essentially, is it okay for women to travel? Yeah, as long as the place they're going to is safe. How do you determine safeness? How do I determine that? Like, how do I do my risk assessment now? Crime rates, right? Like, I have data. Like, there's data to these places. Kidnappings, like crime rates. Like, all that information is out there. It's not like, there's this magical place that nobody knows. Like, no, man, it's like in the middle of the jungle. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Like, even in the jungle, they have survival rates. Like, the Amazon, the expected life expectancy in those particular places. The data's there. It's not like, okay, we need to go and explore and we need to figure out. We have the data. Like, someone might be like, okay, yeah, Antarctica, there's no people, but is it safe? No, right? not because of the natural elements. There are so many things that we have to consider when we make these decisions. It's important to understand that everything is layered, right? Everything's layered, yeah.
What about areas like Miami?
What about it?
Like, because it's like, I guess it's like a hot spot.
Oh, no, so here, even in DC. Let's use DC as an example because it's nearby. If someone said to me, hey, I'm planning on moving to DC, what's the first question that we usually ask? Which part of DC? That's it. I can get the statistics for that part of DC. Like it's the amount of information that we have today. I find it very difficult for anybody to claim complete ignorance in something. It's very hard. It's very challenging. You know, especially with all of the data that we have, because you can move to particular cities, you can move to particular places, and even within those cities, you know the nice part of the city, and you know the bad part of the city, and everything is zoned off, right? It'll tell you like crime rate from this street onward is X, you know, and from this street in here in this box, it's good. And even people in DC, like you know which areas are nice. Like it's like, oh, where you live? Oh, around the capital area. Oh yeah, you're good. You're fine. It's like, no, I'm moving to Southeast. Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea. You know what I mean? It's probably not a good idea. It's probably not a bad idea if you're investing. But anyway, so like, there are a number of layers, again, to these questions. It's important to understand what that is. I mean, there are places that I won't go as a man. Forget, you know what I mean? Like, forget a woman. And these things are important, you know, again, to keep in mind. There are other places, there are certain places in the world where it's common to be kidnapped. Right? It's just a normal thing. You're going to be kidnapped. Yeah, no, like they'll hold you for ransom, and then like they'll return you like, you know, a little bit beat up a couple days later.
Maybe.
Maybe if they feel like it, right? It depends on what their mood's like. We have to be aware of these things. You know, we have to be very aware of these things. What was the second question? One was about traveling. The other one was about
traveling to non-Muslim.
Living in non-Muslim countries. Yes. So there's a few hadith. I think Daraqutni narrates them. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that the fire of the Muslim will not see the fire of the kafir, yani the campfires. Why? He ﷺ said, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum." Whoever imitates the people is from them. وَمَن يَتَوَلَّ مِنْهُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. That whoever takes them as friends, as allies, then he is from them. And you guys are all living in America. May Allah guide you. Yeah. Show me the context where it says during the times of war. You prove it to me. You're saying it's war. I'm saying these are general verses. And we're going to get to generalities, by the way. One of the important uṣūli discussions is how to determine which verses are general and which verses are specific, right? It's very important. Because I can take a general verse and apply it specifically, or I can take a specific verse and apply it generally. Yes. Tafadhal. Okay. Yes.
I don't think it's about the place you're living in. It's about like what do you do, your actions, behaviors,
sure.
morals.
Like what?
Like as an example, like if they drink, if I drink, then I'm trying to be like the kafirin as an example.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Play.
Like what if for that hadith is like for like let's say you live in a Muslim country and all the conditions to live there like peacefully is.
Where did you come up with these conditions, Akhi? Where'd you come up with these conditions?
Okay, let's say like you can have a decent like living lifestyle. Then why are you going to leave that country to a non-Muslim country?
Because I shouldn't live amongst the non-Muslims. Akhi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He prohibited me from allying with them and taking them as friends. Huh?
No, but that's no.
You taking specific verses and trying to apply them to general. May Allah guide you. Yes. Yeah. You're going to say something? No. Refugees? Yeah, they should stay in their Muslim countries. Huh? Why not? Just take allegiance to Taliban and khalas, man. You're fine. No, but I mean, you guys have a grasp and context of the understanding. When you say in a state of war, that does bring some context to it, but it's more along the lines of like here the Prophet ﷺ, even if we say the hadith is sahih, even if we say it's acceptable, here is he talking about politically or religiously?
Religiously.
Huh? It's religiously for you, right? But for most of the ummah, it's politically, right? That here he ﷺ is basically saying that if you are at that distance, what does that mean? That you are putting yourself in threat. The fact that because now you're on the border. You're on the border of Muslim lands, and the fact that you can now see their campfires, it means what? It means you're too close, and I can't protect you. Like you shouldn't be in that situation. Like you have put yourself in a dangerous situation. And it's important to remove yourself from that situation. It is a state of politics. Like it's important to understand these things, that a lot of these discussions about mixing and doing all this, they're all political discussions. The first migration was to where? Habasha. And Habasha was a Christian country. And the second migration was to? Habasha. Like still Christian, like nothing changed. And then the third migration was finally to? Medina. Which was also? Yehudi, right? It's not like there was ever a place where, all right, hey, we're going to set up our place in the middle of nowhere. Like we're going to migrate to this space where there's nobody there, and we're going to do, we're going to do our thing and start our state from there. He purposely chose Medina, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed him to go. But all of those, when they first landed in Medina, were they majority? No, they're still a minority. It's important to keep all these things in context. Like it's just a lack of context and a lack of understanding. Why? A lot of this stuff it goes back to this. It goes back to like a failure to understanding the application of verses. And just like what you did, like you can say, okay, that wilaya, what is even that? Like none of you questioned me saying, okay, what does allying actually mean? Like what does wilaya mean? We've taken all of these buzzwords, right? These general terms that we've been given, and we mean like, oh, I can't be friends with kuffar. Really? What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, what did He say about Abu Talib? إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very purposely chooses the word hub, that you do not guide who you love. Here, I'm allowed to marry a kitabi, right? I'm allowed to marry a Jewish or a Christian woman. What am I going to tell her? I don't love you? Silly. Like, these very simple contradictions, it completely throws a lot of these ideas and concepts out the window. Who am I supposed to show animosity toward?
Like your enemies.
Yeah, enemies, right? The people who are actively trying to remove me, the people who are actively trying to kill me, the people who are actively trying to hurt me and my family. And it's a very natural thing if you think about it. Like this issue of wilaya, this issue of who I align myself and who I disalign myself with, it's a very natural thing. My heart is going to align with certain people and it's not going to align with others. A lot of it has to do with like, okay, our concepts and ideas. And Muslims with other Muslims, why do we tend to align ourselves more with them? Because we agree on more stuff, right? Like we agree on Allah, we agree on prayer, we agree on... So it's just very natural that our inclination is going to be toward that group. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to align myself with Hindus or Buddhists or Christians or Jews. I mean, there are situations where I will. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Even he aligned himself with some pagans. Right? You know, talk about like the worst of religions. This is the pagan religion of Quraysh. And he still allowed himself to align himself with those individuals and to spend time with them. It's important to keep all of these things in context. And as for the issue of like whoever imitates the people, these aren't religious rites and religious customs. It's not cultural rights.
That's what I said.
Yeah, I'm sorry? Oh, okay, yeah. Like it has to be in religious rites and customs. Like if I start doing this, you know what I mean? Or like I start like drinking wine and eating wafers. This is what's problematic, right? This is what the issue is. Because even if you look at those individual symbols, like someone might, like if I wear a cross necklace, for example, I can argue, so someone can argue, it's like, well, a cross is just a shape, just like a triangle or just like a square or just like anything else. But what would the response be? Like, no, that shape in particular has a religious connotation that's associated with it, which is why I don't wear it. Or I shrink down my targhiyah, right? Like I just wear like a really small one. No, right? So there are certain things that you just don't do, right? There are certain things you don't do, not necessarily because they're inherently haram. Right? There's nothing wrong with wearing a smaller taqiyya, or there's nothing wrong with having a cross. Right? Because these are all just shapes, right? They're all shapes, they're all different clothing. But he's prohibiting staying away from those things because of the religious symbolism that's associated with them. That's all. Klaus, any other questions? All right, so let's go back and talk about some of the verses that we had mentioned here. I think there's one that I liked. This one's really good. وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرْحًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلُّ مُخْتَالٍ فَخُورٍ. That do not turn your nose up at people. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's saying, do not walk around arrogantly. Don't walk arrogantly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not love arrogant or boastful people. So here, what does that look like? How do I know if somebody's walking around arrogantly versus somebody who's not walking around arrogantly?
They walk like too slowly, their head is up.
Okay.
They're speaking condescendingly to people.
Okay. So it's basically in how they're dealing with others, right? This is how the arrogance is judged. If somebody's can a person walk alone arrogantly?
Yes.
I think he can.
Yes.
Yes.
It's
Intentionally.
yeah. Like okay. All right. Let me see. Is there a good way to like demonstrate this? Right. You know, it's just like you have this like tafakhur. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? Like you just have this attitude about it's really this attitude that you have. But is there a problem with walking in and of itself? No, right? Like walking is something that we all do. It's something that's halal. But there is an action that is associated with it, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is prohibiting. Is He prohibiting walking here? No. What is He prohibiting then? Arrogance, yes. Sure, no, not a problem. So over here, walking in this manner, it is what?
Haram.
It is haram, right? It is not permissible to walk in this way. Why? Like lying is clear. Cheating is clear. Murder is clear. Why is it haram to walk in this way? Because of takabbur. Right? Takabbur is something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like pride and arrogance, these are things that are categorically prohibited, just like those things are prohibited.
So with bringing up like people's past mistakes and
Rubbing in their face?
fall under this?
I think that's a manifestation of arrogance, or it can be, because there are a few ways that arrogant people work, right? One way is that they praise themselves, and what do they do with others? All right, they try to push them down, right? They think the way to climb the ladder is on people's heads, right? You know, by kind of putting them down and like really dismissing them. So I think it can be a manifestation of that.
Or blackmail too.
Huh?
It can be blackmail to
Sure.
use somebody's.
Oh, yeah, oh, that's true. So you can use it. You can use that information to blackmail someone.
In a state of anger.
Yeah.
What if those mistakes are like, let's say those mistakes were like, or their behavior never changed because of those mistakes?
Can you give me an example, just so I can understand?
Like someone made a certain mistake, right?
Yeah.
And then their behavior like so showed it.
Okay. Somebody lied. Okay. Now, let's say that the person lied. Let's say that we have Ahmed and Ahmed lied. That what is he doing now? Because this is the connection I'm missing. What is it about him now? What are you trying to say about him?
I mean, like lying is. I mean, I'm just asking. I don't really have a specific example.
If you give me a specific case, it'll be easier for me to understand.
I'll think of one and I'll
Okay, khalas, that's fine. Over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ يُزَكُّونَ أَنفُسَهُمْ بَلِ اللَّهِ يُزَكِّي مَن يَشَاءُ. That have you considered those who claim purity for themselves? No, Allah purifies whoever He will. Again, this has to do with arrogance, right? A lot of these verses are consistent with that. This is good. Do not gaze longingly at what we have given some of them to enjoy. What is he talking about here? وَلَا تَمُنَّا. He's talking about envy, right? He's talking about envy and jealousy. So it's, or to covet what other people have. Here, it's interesting how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَلَا تَمُنَّا عَيْنَيْكَ. That don't put this hope in other people's things, right? You know, don't covet other people's things. And this is an example and manifestation of jealousy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't say la tahsadu, right? He doesn't just say like, you know, don't be jealous or don't covet. He actually gives a practical example of this, like this. Why? Because it's an expression of sometimes how we feel toward other people's things. That is what do you guys think that is? Is it prohibition or is it discouragement? I think it's a prohibition. It's a prohibition against jealousy. I'm sorry?
I feel like that leads to becoming a
Oh, for sure.
You could also say it's telling them how someone might feel about you if they feel
Sure.
towards
Absolutely. I mean, so bringing that awareness, right? Bringing that awareness that it is very possible that other people will covet what it is, the things that you have. And then dealing with that spiritually, there are different ways to do that. So over here, do not covet. This is this is more clear, right? This is a clear prohibition. Don't be jealous and do not covet. Over here, okay, this is good. Over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِكَيْ لَا تَحْزَنُوا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا مَا أَصَابَكُمْ. That do not grieve over what you missed or what happened to you. Allah is well aware of what you do. This is a discouragement or a prohibition.
I'll say karahiyya, discouragement.
Yeah, this is more of a discouragement of that. And why do you think it's a discouragement?
Well, the literal sense said may not. The other one said do not.
No, I mean here it's a yeah, okay, that works. There's no clear prohibition over here.
Is it 'cause it's an emotion, so it's like it fluctuates?
Exactly. So this is more of like an emotional response to that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He says like don't be sad, or or don't grieve, I don't have control over that. You know what I mean? Like it's not something like I have control. Yeah, exactly. It's a call to be patient. And not just that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He say here? He says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is all aware of everything that you do.
But there's context too, right? Because the Prophet sometimes they grieved.
Right, the Prophet he did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So over here, it's more an encouragement of what? Yes, Tawala.
There's like a hadith to the Prophet ﷺ where he said, like, do not say what if, because that's looking for Satan, right? Similar to this. So how do you reconcile that?
Lola? Yeah. Okay, so what do you think? Even here, by him saying, don't say what if, is that a prohibition or is it something that is a discouragement?
Discouragement, maybe. Like you're not accepting al-qadar, maybe. You're just saying, what if this?
Yeah, but is a person actually denying qadar when he says what if?
No, but it's like you're thinking too much about
It can lead to that, right? And it's definitely a path toward ill thoughts. But to say to someone like, no, somebody's like, man, what if I just had invested in Bitcoin earlier? Well, right now the market's crashing, but like still, but it's like, what if I invested earlier? Is that person really denying the qadar? No, is it right? Like this, like, oh, it's like finally I didn't want to talk to you anyway, right? What were you gonna say?
What if somebody confided?
No what ifs, sister. No, go ahead.
What if somebody confided in you, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, about something.
Sure.
Then would it, and they're looking for advice or something.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, would it be their case to judge?
So if anybody shares any information with me, does it give me the right to judge that person?
No, absolutely not.
Right? A person comes to me and they're like, hey, I'm saying like a person comes to me, for example, and says, Sheikh, I made zina.
I'm sorry?
If somebody said, like they say, I committed zina. So I'd be like, yeah, you jahannami, bro. Like, you can't, because and I'm not here, again, it's not to dismiss how great a sin zina is.
Yeah.
But is it possible that this person has done other things?
No.
Right? That's kind of, I don't want to say counterbalance, but he's done other things those are actually the things that he'll be known for. These are the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise him for. Right? And all this other stuff, it might get dismissed. So judgment in that case, like I can judge the action. I can tell him, well, what you did was wrong. Right? That there's nothing wrong with that. But it'd be like, oh yeah, you're a jahannami, evil person, like, never talk to me again. It doesn't benefit you, it doesn't benefit him. Yes.
Is it a kabira to say that someone's in Jahannam because Allah forgives who he loves?
Of course. It is a major sin. Like who am I to decide? Even there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if you call your brother a kafir,
and he's not kafir, one of you is
it's going to return to one of you.
Even like the hadith of someone in Bani Israel who kept giving advice to someone who was sinning Allah, and then he told them, Wallahi lan yaghfir Allahu lak. Then Allah
he forgave him, subhanAllah. Yeah. May Allah protect us.
Judging is like, don't you think judging has many meanings? For example, let's say someone that's been drinking their whole life.
Sure.
Then he wants to marry your daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, are you judging him if you tell him no?
No.
Even though, let's say, he changed.
It's okay. That's between him and Allah. You understand?
But is
Like,
that considered judging?
it's not judging. Over here, there's a standard that you create when you're looking for something for yourself, right? Or something, because over here there are choices. It's not like it's a situation where you have to deal with this. No, I have a choice, like to marry this person or not marry this person. And when I'm in that situation, I'm not judging that person. I'll be like, I don't think you'd be a good husband or a good wife. It's as simple as that.
But that is considered
Yeah.
judging.
Huh?
It's also different if they stop doing the
Even if they
uṣūl
stopped.
or-
Here, even if they stop, and let me put it to you this way. There are certain decisions that we make in our life that have long-reaching consequences. Like, for example, if a person made zina, can Allah forgive him? Yeah, absolutely. Like, would everybody be open to marrying that person? No, right? And it's not that they're judging them. They're like, well, no, I'm sorry. Like, that's not something I held myself to a particular standard, and I expect that standard for my potential spouse. So it's
Is that
yeah.
called judging or no?
No, that's not judging. That's not judging at all. This is a decision, right? Which is very different. Judging would be like, yeah, he's an evil person. That's why I'm not marrying him. But somebody who has a particular characteristic, you know, I mean, if a person is a thief, خلاص يا أخي, they're a thief. There's nothing. You're not judging them. It's like, no, you are a thief. Like, you know what I mean? Like you steal like every day. It's not. This is part of who you are. This is not. You know what I mean? You're not judging him for that. And even judgment, like, there's accountability also. Like, so there's that type of judgment as well. If somebody comes forward and be like, hey, I find out somebody stole my money, like I have every right to go and like approach that person or take that person to court, right? There's a judgment that's going to happen. They're going to be like, okay, well, you stole and the money needs to be returned. So in that sense, when we talk about judgment, we're talking about spiritually. Yani, what is this person's position in front of Allah? I have no right of doing that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I mean by the type of judgment that is not permissible. It's basically me determining what this person's status is in front of Allah.
Okay.
Right? So if somebody comes to me and be like, you know, and they're like, they have an alcohol problem, it's like, yeah, that guy's a level 6. You know, like based on what? You know what I mean? Like, there's no way to know any of those things. There's a reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reserved that judgment for Himself, Azza wa Jal. And like you guys said, like all of these things about grieving what is past, and it's very natural, right, to have those feelings. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants us to curb some of those feelings and remind us to have sabr, to have forbearance, and to have patience with them. So over here, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا, right? This is a very common one. This is, right? This is a recommendation. Like, you shouldn't go near zina. It's probably a bad idea. This is not only is this a prohibition of zina, this is also a prohibition of what?
Anything that might lead to.
Anything that might lead to zina, right? Anything that might lead to zina. This is a very clear prohibition, right? This is not, so nobody walk away saying that, well, you know, it's actually a suggestion, right? Right? So, over here, don't have any compassion for them in carrying out Allah's law. Who's He talking about here?
For like the
Yeah.
No, not muhtar,
Yeah. So it's basically anybody who's carrying out the capital punishment, right? Whether it be flogging or whether it be the death penalty. Like, don't show mercy, meaning like don't lighten up. Like, the punishment is the punishment. There's no reason to show that. And if the purpose is to put on it to show the public and discourage the public, in addition to helping that person reconcile, then holding back is not going to benefit that person. Yes.
I've seen videos of like people after they get the jild.
Yeah.
Like people start hugging them. Like.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It sounds like a cultural thing. I don't think I'd want to be hugged after being flogged or anything. This, like, your back is all raw. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Allah protect us. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنما الخمر والميسر والأنساب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه. So ijtinab, this is a very strong command to stay away from, you know, different things and different practices. It's the same verb that also came previously with zina. And this, again, to stay away from it at all costs. الذين يتبعون رسول النبي الذي Okay. إنما حرم عليكم الميتة ودم لحم الخنزير وما أهل لغير الله به, that he has forbidden for you. So over here the clear term is being used that it is haram, it is prohibited. Consuming others' wealth, consuming others' property, this is haram. Here, right, the verses of riba. Apparently there are some people who feel that riba is okay. I don't know. May Allah guide them.
I had a question earlier, like
Sure.
I tried to Google the answer and I
Sure.
came across a fatwa.
About?
I don't know if it was a fatwa or not, but someone said as long as the interest rate is not like over 100%, it's halal. And like,
Yeah, so they're over 100%? Wow.
99.999.
Yeah.
something like that, but like,
No, so the thing is, I'll share. I did a lecture on mortgages. The idea wasn't to talk about riba by itself, but riba was one of the components of the lecture. I'll send it to you, inshallah. Take a look. And it just presents the different opinions and different ideas. I actually even shared it with a lot of my peers. And they're like, it makes sense. So inshallah, take a look if it makes sense to you. I'm sorry?
Not a single criticism of it?
Well, there is, like, people do. You always have critic. Like, there was one brother, he was like, he said, he's like, and there are some people who try to confuse people by defining riba and defining usury and defining interest. And I was like, I wasn't trying to confuse anyone.
Yeah,
I was like, I was like actually trying to define it so that we can stay away from it. Not just that, subhanAllah, the amazing thing with riba also is that it is one of the things that Umar, what did he say? He said, I was hoping that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam kana yufassiruha.
what?
I was like, كنت أرجو أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يعني يفسرها.
يفسرها.
Yeah, riba.
Well, because it's not like لم تفسر, like how do you like use that?
Exactly. So the thing is, all you can do is you can take isharat, right? So, and what you can do is, I think there's actually a good survey that was done by an economist, right? Not by a religious scholar, which is, I mean, alhamdulillah, I'm glad he did it, but this is something that the clergy should have done a long time ago, is he did a survey of ribawi practices. Like, so he did a survey before Islam and after Islam. And how do like different societies kind of deal with it? It's actually, he did a really good job. Yeah. Huh? Oh, explain. Explain. It's like, I wish that this was one of the things the Prophet ﷺ explained. So. Anyway.
There's some people who say not to just not go over a certain percentage.
Yes, right. So, like I said, you were there at the lecture. When I, yeah.
There was a dad that was like talking about conspiracies.
I mean, the conspiracies are important. They're important during riba discussions.
No, he was just saying a whole bunch of stuff about it. And he was like,
Yeah.
this is that, and I couldn't.
Yeah, you can, because the conspiracy was like really important. It's like, yeah, those Masons, right? So, so over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَلَا تُبَاشِرُهُنَّ وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ, and do not go near them while you're in i'tikaf.
Yeah,
Is that a prohibition, or is that? I always wondered about this verse too. I spent a lot of time with it. I was like, in what situation would you be that you would be with your wife during i'tikaf? What do you guys think? Let's talk about that first, and then we can talk about what the hukum is.
If you can bring a gas cooker in the masjid, you can definitely
one year there was a brother who brought a propane tank into the musalla and started cooking. So he was like, so Uthman is saying, if you can bring a propane tank into the masjid, you can bring your wife too. So, and the problem is our frame of reference. When we think of i'tikaf, we think it is something that is completely like separate. chances of them actually interacting with their wives was very high, right? It was very high. So this is why, and Allah knows best. Like versus today, right? A lot of like we get stuff delivered to us. We have bathrooms in the masjid. Like there's very little need for us to actually leave the masjid grounds versus at that time. So what is hukum? Then being intimate with your wife during i'tikaf, it is haram. Wow.
Or maybe just rules i'tikaf.
Huh?
This
What is the hukum of i'tikaf? Yeah, I mean it's recommended or mubah, like either or. So if there is a hukum that's related to something that's mubah, how can you say that it goes above it?
Well, it's the same thing if you're fasting, let's say about the nafila. If you're fasting a nafila.
Yeah,
Like it's the same thing.
it's the same thing. It's what?
Like if you're fasting Sitt al-Shawwal.
If you're fasting to show out, and you know what I mean,
And
and you get hungry. You know, like
Oh yeah.
you know what I mean, like and then you eat.
Just ruins your.
It's just like right. It's makruh, and it's the same thing here, right? It's something because what are you doing to the ibadah? What are you doing to the worship?
So like
Right, you're tainting it, right? You're tainting it by doing this, like you're removing the idea behind it. So but to say it's haram, meaning that a person will be sinful if he does it, I find that difficult. This one's good. Well, how much time do we have? Okay, we got a few minutes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ إِنْ أَرَدْنَا تُحَسَّنًا لِتَبْتَغُوا عَرَضَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. That do not force your slave girls into prostitution when they themselves wish to remain honorable in your quest for the short-term gains of this world.
Can you explain like a few minutes of it, or is it?
So there are
something that I think.
So Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, he had like 9 slave girls, and he used to and he forced them into prostitution.
Okay. They never did that with like al-mar'a al-hurra.
No.
Okay.
No, this is not a practice that was done with free women. No, it was always done with slave girls. I mean, not that it makes it any better,
of course,
but you know what I mean. Like that's what was done. My question here is in aradna tahassuna, that okay, when they themselves don't want to do it, what if they consent?
It's not a grant anymore.
Yeah. It's true.
But like it's wrong.
It's still wrong, but it's not like they're being forced. It's not like something with them.
Okay.
So just like the.
No, I mean here. Okay. But then what is the advantage of this addition?
He's taking a specific situation and like.
Well, I mean, do you think? I mean, I guess we're jumping the gun a little bit, but does this apply generally, or does this apply specifically to that situation? Generally, right? I can't force if I have slave girls. I can't force them to be prostitutes. Like I can't. That's not something that's allowed. But over here, this edition here, they themselves wish to remain honorable. What if they don't? What if they're okay with the lifestyle?
That's still haram, but it's not like you're not forcing.
Voluntary harm.
It's voluntary harm.
Yeah. It's haram.
So I mean, some of the Mufassirin had that. It's to show يعني خرج مخرج الغالب. That most women they don't want to be in this situation. Like most women don't want to be in this situation. They don't want to be forced into prostitution. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He adds this in, it's to show how khabith the amal is. Like, it's to show how evil it is. And this is just to do tawqeed, and it's just to emphasize the fact of how bad it is. وَلَا تُؤْتُوا سُفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ. That do not entrust the property or entrust money to feeble-minded people. Is that a discouragement or a prohibition? Discouragement. Thanks. So the next topic, inshallah, general and specific. We'll spend some time with this next week, but just a small introduction. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَسْأَلُوا عَنْ أَشْيَاءَ أَوْ تُبْدُ لَكُمْ تَسُؤْكُمْ. And over here, وَسَارِقُ وَسَارِقَةُ فَاقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا. That you who believe do not ask about matters which, if made known to you, might make things difficult for you. And here, and do not go anywhere. No, this is wrong. This should be the male and female, the thieves, and cut their hands. So over here, which one is general and which one is specific? Or are both of them general or both of them specific?
The right one is specific.
This is specific? Okay.
It's general.
It's general.
This is general? And this is? Specific, right? You can't just cut like anybody's hands?
No.
Right? So this is general, right?
No.
This is specific.
No.
I think it's other.
They're playing with the.
No. So I mean, the scholars, the scholars, they use this as an example of how they use this as an example. Why? What do you guys like the get worried that you might find out something that great. There's something bad that could happen. Great. Over here, any thing. You understand? This is general. Any. This is not a Muslim thing or non-Muslim thing or an Arab thing or non-Arab thing. This applies to anybody who can be described as a thing with this characteristic as well. Okay? So, thank you. Like, for example,